All right, so big news today. Buffalo Bills head coach Sean McDermott is officially out as head coach. Got to be honest, a little bit of a shock, just in terms of how quick it came after being eliminated. I mean, you look at this team and you look at what it was before Sean McDermott came there. He stabilized a franchise that had been really not that great for almost 2 decades, right? And this is a coach who took Buffalo from a team that hoped to make it to 500 wins, and now every year, for pretty much, right, is a Super Bowl contender. Everyone always has them as a contender to make it far, especially when you got Josh Allen back there. So I feel like initially could have felt a bit of an aggressive move to start off the offseason with, but then when you think about it, and especially the fan base and like how they probably felt about McDermott as years went on, and certain losses that happened in the playoffs, and you look at just, hey, I mean, this year we've seen like 10 coaching vacancies at this point. I know Halfley had gone to Miami as of today, but you look at the timing and just how like John Harbaugh moved teams. He got let go of the Ravens. Mike Tomlin's stepping down. I mean, there's just a lot of, Stefanski now is the head coach of the Falcons. There's just a lot of different movements. And so, I think just in the, like, relative to a lot of other things going on with other teams, this isn't as crazy to think that this would happen. And especially how this team has fallen short of the playoffs a lot. Knowing that, the more I understand probably why this all happened. I'm not saying it's like a quick and easy decision that it made 100% sense at the end of the season, but I do think that the more you think about it, the more, especially I guess if you're outside looking in and you're not, following the Bills all the time, you probably aren't as aware as probably compared to the fans who, maybe I think half of them, or maybe a little bit more than half of them, wanted this to happen, sooner than later, given the lack of success in the playoffs. But I think, kind of backing up a little bit here, because I think context does matter in terms of what Sean McDermott did for the Bills. And, if you look at what he inherited, in a sense, right, they hadn't been to the playoffs in, I think, 17 years. They didn't have a quarterback. They didn't really have an identity, right? They didn't have anything, and so when you look at what he's done, Buffalo has become one of the most consistent teams in the NFL. Division titles, double-digit wins, home playoff games. Like nationally, they are a team that everyone looks at as a real contender and a really good team, especially during the regular season. They're competitive, and I think when you're a coach that brings that to a city and brings that to a team, that definitely matters. And he changes organizations in that way, or at least he changed the Bills organization in that way. So a lot of other teams would really want that for their team, their organization, their city, and all that stuff. So I do think that a key point here for me, at least, is that Sean McDermott was not a bad coach who got fired. I think it was more of, he was a good coach and it just wasn't working. And you can only go through enough playoff losses like they have, and at some point you just have to make a shift, a change or something. And I think he raised the standard for what the Bills team is expecting. But now I think it's going to require probably another coach to take him to that next level. You look at what happened with like John Fox in Denver, and so many years, right? Like they just didn't have the success they wanted. You bring in Gary Kubiak, and they win the Super Bowl. So I think those situations in football unfortunately happen, where you get one guy who really changes an organization, can't really bring him to the final promised land, and then some other one comes in and is able to do that. But I do think this is also a case where, like, as good as the Buffalo Bills have become, I think they have become also into a position where that good enough is no longer good enough, right? They're good enough to make it to the playoffs, and they're good enough to be a good regular season team, but they no longer want to just be good enough, right? You want to be an elite team, can close out games, can hang with the Chiefs and Mahomes and Lamar and Joe Burrow and all of them, and even the Patriots now. The Patriots are coming up, right? And they're starting to have a little bit of a revolution there. So you look at Josh Allen as the key guy in all this, and everything changed when you have him, right? He's got the arm, athleticism, he can take over games, and so now because of that, you're judged now on Super Bowls, and that's where the standard kind of shifts for Buffalo, or shifted for Buffalo. And the biggest moments against Kansas City, Cincinnati, and then now Denver, there's a pattern that kind of has developed, right? It's close losses, missed opportunities, late game breakdowns, situational football, mishaps and stuff like that. So, it's just the tough part where you got to start evaluating, okay, like whenever those happen consistently and year over year, something's got to change, and they're definitely not going to get rid of Josh Allen, and over the years they've had good rosters, and I think at some point it just, unfortunately, I guess the way the business goes and the way the game goes, it kind of falls on the coach, whether it's completely warranted or not. I think sometimes that's how it kind of goes in terms of being who's getting let go or not. And if it's taking a look into that loss to Denver, I think for me, you got to also look at it that Josh Allen had 4 turnovers, and that's something you can't ignore. That's something that is a big part of what happened, as to why they couldn't win and almost, they were put themselves in a position to actually still pull away and escape it, but it couldn't happen. And they had chances though, right? They had chances and they had opportunities to just like simplify the game, just lean into that structure, protect the quarterback, and the game kind of drifted into just a lot of like aggressive chaos, just kind of being too, I don't know, trying to have Josh Allen be too much like Superman and too much on relying on him. And yes, that is on Josh to fix that. But I do feel like also as a system, I think that the system of the Bills has become, if Josh Allen isn't putting on the Superman cape, then they're not going to win big games. And I think at some point there has to be some balance and structure of their game. That's the game management aspect of it, or like the coaching philosophy aspect of it, where it can't just be Josh Allen feeling like he has to be heroic every game, right? It can't be him thinking that he has to always make the big play and every playoff drive is do or die. It's got to be, there has to be some level of leaning on receivers and scheme and the run game. And I know James Cook is there, but I also think too that there has to be the way they draw up their game plan can't just revolve around him having to just be Superman all the time, right? And I think right now too, like if you look around the league, you got John Harbaugh out. You got Mike Tomlin stepping away. That's, again, nearly 10 teams so far, either changing head coaches or just restructuring things. Like, I think this is almost like a reset era for the NFL with those couple of teams. And it's going to be weird. It's going to be interesting to see a game with the Steelers without Tomlin there, game with the Ravens without Harbaugh there. It's just so bizarre to think about, and now we're going to see Bills team without Sean McDermott there. And so I do think though that, like, in terms of with Josh specifically and the Bills and with where they're at, I think Allen's in his prime, and the more you have these year over year losses, these close game losses, or losses where the roadmap is there for success. I think this year there was such a big emphasis on the fact that there's no Mahomes, there's no Burrow, there's no Lamar. It's the Bills Super Bowl, for the taking, and I just think that it was a tough thing to see them not capitalize on that and not really kind of take advantage of that moment, right? And I think the argument to be had that like it was too soon, and Sean McDermott is kind of a scapegoat, I think it's there. I can understand both sides of the fence here. Again, initially I felt like it was too soon for Sean McDermott to be fired because I think he created a culture, he built trust, players believed in him, and that's kind of stuff that doesn't show up on stat sheets. But there's that level of also risk where what if the next coach is worse, right? I mean, you look at when the Titans fired Mike Vrabel. He goes on to have success now with the Patriots, and where's the Titans? And they're in no man's land. And those things happen whenever you almost make these rash decisions, I guess, or you don't really have a next person in line who can have a clear vision of what the team is going to be afterwards. And hopefully this doesn't become that, because I would hate to see someone like Josh Allen's just prime and his talent go to waste. going through years and years of a, you know, like reorg type of deal. But like, I think that having the right coach here is important, and also something has to change, and that's kind of also where the Bills made that decision, and I still think that like at some point, like whenever you keep getting close but never breaking through, the coach does come like into the equation at that point, right? Because even if he's great, and I don't think McDermott was a terrible coach at all. I think he was an amazing coach. But like, there's that notion where it can't just be the same thing year after year. And so, when you look at now the type of coach that the Buffalo Bills should hire, personally, I think that they should hire an offensive forward head coach, right? Someone who can structure the game so Josh doesn't feel like he has to be Superman every playoff drive, right? There's someone who can, have good situational football, really do well in the red zone, like that red zone efficiency, have that team be built around having that late game composure, calmness, just like under control, being able to finish off games whenever they're close, especially late in the game, and just being able to adapt to different schemes on offense when things kind of go sideways, right? So I think basically I just feel like they need to be able to finish off games and have that sense of like scheme that will stop other teams from being able to just like pull one over them at the very end of the game and just be able to shut them down, right? Just those kind of game scenarios are going to come in huge, But I mean, again, like you look at what McDermott's done on the positive side of things. He ended the 17-year playoff drought in his first season. He had just an amazing, I think, consistent regular season success record. He was 98-50 in the regular season over 9 seasons. That's a winning percentage near like 0.66% among the best in the league during like that span. Bills won at least like 10 games for 7 straight seasons, right, including a 12-5 season in 2025. So I mean, and divisionally, he claimed 5 straight AFC East titles from 2020 to 2024. Again, consistency, right? I mean, he's had this amazing impact on the franchise. He's ranked second all-time coaching wins in the franchise, behind only Marv Levy. He's had playoff appearances in 8 of 9 seasons, right, establishing Buffalo as a fixture, right, in January football. So he's always been able to take this team to the playoffs, and there's always that expectation that they're going to make it to the playoffs. And I also think, for me, one of the best things he did for the team, for their success in general, was that under McDermott, Josh Allen evolved into one of the top quarterbacks in the league, right? MVP season 2024. Bunch of Pro Bowl nods. So like, he's done such great things for this organization, for the team, for the players, and development wise. And so on that hand, I think it's tough to see him being let go. But on the other side of it, again, it's a playoff record and Super Bowl drought, like his playoff record's 8-8. And if you look at also the big losses, Buffalo has lost playoff games by 3 points or less in multiple seasons, right, including this one against Broncos. And in the last 5 playoff defeats, the Buffalo Bills blew fourth quarter leads in 4 of them, right? So that's a trend that, like, you don't really, you pay attention to, and it's something that you don't really want to keep continuing. And as there can only be so many more years and years and years where it happens, where at some point you're like, all right, we probably have to rethink just like who's leading the team into these playoff situations, and why are we ending up on the wrong side of it all, right? And you look at also on the road, the Bills were 0-5 in playoff games on the road, and playoff road success hasn't happened for Buffalo in over 30 years. I mean, that's just like that's a tough one too, if they have a playoff game on the road. And I think like a big one here that I feel like a lot of the fans, from what I'm seeing, look at is just like the losses over key playoff opponents, but repeatedly, right? Chiefs, losing to them, multiple times, not being able to kind of adapt and get over the hump against the Chiefs. Granted, it is Mahomes, it's the Chiefs for sure, but at some point you got to be able to like overcome that if you do want to be an elite team, and I think that's the standard they have. It's like, yes, you can put the asterisk or whatever, you could put the excuse of, well, it's Mahomes, it's the Chief, it's the greatest, they're one of the greatest of all time, but at the same time, like, well, if your standard is to just be second to the greatest of all time, or to always be just right at that point, then fine, sure, right? But they have a higher standard than that. So I think that's something that kind of factors into it. And I think too that like it's just been tough to watch. I think, and McDermott also rose as a defensive coach, and so in big playoff games, it's tough to watch them fail to make critical stops and defensive stops in the games, and that's been a big recurring theme also for players there, or for the team there too, where the players can't seem to make big stops. And I think when you tally all that up, right, from can't close out games and road playoff losses and repeated losses against the Chiefs and these kind of situations and defensive breakdowns, it just makes all for a all signs point to just that it's maybe time to go in a different direction. And again, I'm not saying that I think it was the right call. Like, honestly, time will tell. It's just one of those where time will tell. I do think it was early. I mean, it was just right away after they lost, he gets let go. But I also think that like there was at some point that, something's got to give, the dam was going to break at some point, and if they're not going to get rid of Josh Allen, right? And they can only, do so much in terms of the roster. I think sometimes just a new voice, a new leadership is needed, and it'll be interesting to see, right? Like who gets the spot, because I think there are options out there in terms of who can replace McDermott. I mean, Joe Brady, he was talked about, and I think that could be a pretty good option, but I think it's time will tell in terms of what kind of coach we're looking for and who's going to interview. I think we'll kind of get a better sense of like who can be the coach for the team, and also what direction the team's headed based on kind of who they interview, right? Who's like what kind of coach are they looking for, and the style of play and all that. But I do think that Josh Allen should have a say in who the coach should be. Just because like he's the guy, right? He is the guy of the organization, and you look at all these teams that have had say in, or quarterbacks who have had say in who the team's going to get, and there tends to be success there, right? I mean, of course, Brady, I mean, he's going to be always had a say in I guess like when he went to Tampa, like kind of what he wanted or whatever. But if you look at like even Peyton, or if you look at Aaron Rodgers, who's the opposite of that, where he didn't really have a say, there was always some kind of like short, like coming up short a little bit, but like I think in terms of just being able to have a complementary level of relationship with quarterback and the coach, I do think like Josh Allen and it should be a voice in the room as to where they're going to go. And I think Brandon Beane is going to definitely talk with Josh. I think he's a pretty good general manager that will take the opinions of his players and his squad to see, like who would be a good coach, who would Josh want to be the head coach there. But overall, again, it's one of those tough things about football where you could have a lot of success in the regular season, but once the playoffs hit and year over year you're just coming up short, it's that's sometimes where teams tend to go a different direction when coaches can't get it done. But again, I think just in terms of what Sean McDermott has done for the Bills and the development of Josh Allen, I think there's a lot of teams out there that would love to have the success the Bills have had, and I definitely think there's gonna be a lot of teams out there that will be trying to go after Sean McDermott if he's gonna coach, again next season. I think that's always up in the air with coaches, if maybe he'll take a year off or something, but I feel like he should probably keep coaching and coach next year, but we'll see how it goes.